evoke sensory evaluation gives guidelines for the preparation and serving of samples under controlled conditions so that biasing factors are minimized. For example, the use of both sample coding and different that you need to practical or exercise very well so that there will be no other interfering factors where they may lead you to have results which are not the reliable or representative results. That's why we are talking about the use of booth. Booth is like a small cube whereby a panelist or sensory evaluator will stay in that booth during the analysis, so he or she will not be able to communicate with other panelists. But also you can use sample coding so that to code the sample and make a panelist not to be able to communicate with other panelists during the analysis. And when we're talking about to measure, sensory evaluation is a quantitative science in which numerical data are collected to establish lawful and specific relationships between product characteristics and human perception. An example is having people generate numerical responses reflecting their perception of how strong a product may taste or smell. For example, you will be served with a product, maybe there are two different types of mango juice, and you're supposed to tell how you perceive the concentration of sugar in it. So you can say maybe it is the sugar is low or it's high, depending on the scale. You can be given a scale from 1 to 5, whereby 1 means low and 5 means it is the highest concentration. So from that analysis, you will be generating numerical responses. Like maybe 20 panelists indicated that the sugar is too high by indicating or pointing out number 5 in a scale. And for that case, that means that we are measuring the sensory attribute by numbers. But also to analyze, sensory data should be analyzed in order to be interpretable. Proper analysis of the data is a critical part of sensory testing, since data generated from human observers are often highly variable. So you need to be able to analyze your data and come up with the information which will assist, maybe if it is a research study or a marketing study, then you will be able to tell if your product will be liked in the market or not. But if you are going to maybe to analyze if there is a difference between one product and another, then after analysis you'll be able to interpret and say if the products they do differ maybe a certain sensory attribute. And to interpret, sensory evaluation involves the interpretation of the results for inferences. In experiments, data and statistical information are only useful when interpreted. So sensory evaluation is generally the science of judging and evaluating the quality of a food by the use of senses. That means taste, smell, sight, touch, and hearing. Are we together?
Yes. Yes, madam.
Why are we doing sensory evaluation? We do sensory evaluation first to discriminate two or more products. The simplest sensory test merely attempts to answer whether any perceptible difference exists between two types of products. That, like, if you are I want to produce maybe a chocolate, and I want it to be I want people to compare with another type of chocolate and see if there is any difference between the two products. So I can do a discrimination test using the sensory evaluation to ask the panelists to identify if there are any differences which exist between the two products. And for that case, maybe it will enable me to understand maybe if my product is of low quality, or maybe I need to improve a certain component in order for that product to be able to meet the quality that is expected by the consumers. Another aim is to for description of the product. This involves quantifying the perceived intensities of the sensory characteristics of a product. It's like I want you to tell me how that product looks like, or maybe if it is the color or the taste or the smell. I want to know how you perceive the intensities of the sensory characteristics of the product. So sensory evaluation can also do that. Another type is to determine the preference and quantification of perception of the product. The sensory can attempt to determine which product is preferred over another, or quantify the degree of liking or disliking of a product. So you have two products, you want to understand if which one is preferred, so that if you were producing in a small maybe quantity, you have to make it in a large or mass production so that you can go into the market. So that you can be able to tell by doing sensory evaluation and understand the preferences of the consumers. There are different categories of sensory testing. Sensory evaluation of food can broadly be divided into two categories of testing. There are objective testing and subjective testing. The objective testing, the sensory attributes of the product are evaluated by selected or trained panel. Why are we selecting the trained panelists for objective testing? Because we want them to describe maybe the product, or to tell if there is any difference. So that's where it is important to use trained panelists, because you are going to do the objective testing. But for subjective testing, the reactions of consumers to the sensory properties of product are measured. And for that case, you use untrained panelists, because you want to understand the perception of the consumers. Therefore, consumers will be the one doing the sensory analysis of the product. The power of sensory evaluation is realized when the two elements are combined. Like if you have done the objective testing and then that you get the description of the product as it will be observed by the trained panelists, but then subjective testing, whereby you will know the preference of consumers, and at the end you will know now which products you're supposed to produce processing techniques, or the quality or the sensory attribute of your product. Are we together? Because I just got internet interruption. Can you hear me?
Yes, madam.
So by doing sensory evaluation, it reveals insights into the way in which sensory properties drive consumer acceptance and emotional benefits, and that's what we call the preference mapping of a product. So why collect sensory data? Sensory property is a complex property, and it is an option about the product itself, which cannot be replaced by any other method. Human assessors provide unique insight into the sensory perception of foods and beverage. So we prefer human assessors, specifically if we want to test the preference. Like you cannot use a machine to test the preference of consumers. It is a very complex property where you have to use real people, real consumers, because some of the characteristics are it is not just maybe the hardness or the texture, but it's the combination of some of the sensory attributes, like the flavors, the color, and all that. So the major reasons for using humans to collect sensory data include no instrument to perform perceptions of multidimensional stimuli as conducted by the parallel processing of the human nervous system. Only human sensory data provides the best model for how consumers are likely to perceive and react to food products in real life. Sensory evaluation applications. So why are we studying sensory evaluation? Because as I've said that we can discriminate products or describe products or understand how consumer perceived your product. So sensory evaluation application, one of it is product development. That sensory tests offer a course to select the product that optimizes value for money. When we are talking value for money is like when you are during the processing of your product, maybe you need to boil your maybe something like your 20 minutes, but boiling of a certain ingredient for 20 minutes, it costs a lot because you have to use power, you have to use time, but also the staff should be there to make sure that she is controlling that process for 20 minutes. But then if you want to optimize value for money, you can change. Maybe what if you change, instead of using boiling for 20 minutes and boil for 10 minutes? Does it going to have effect in your product? And then that means you can prepare your product which will undergo the boiling process for 20 minutes, and another one which will undergo the boiling process for 10 minutes, and see if there will be any differences. If not, then you will take the 10 minutes boiling process so that to save money, and then you will optimize value for money. So at the end, you will reduce the production cost. Social evaluation is used as a practical application in product development by aiding in product matching, improvements, and grading. As I've said, maybe I want to produce or to make my chocolate, and then I will compare with the other companies, big companies, and see if what kind or maybe what characteristics that my product meets in comparison with other chocolates from other companies. So that will also enable you during product development and know which process or which conditions have to be changed in order to improve the quality of your product. It is a way to reduce uncertainty and risk in decision making. Like you need to know if your product is acceptable in the market before starting producing at a large scale. So that's why we are doing sensory evaluation in product development. That you have your, I can say, the small scale production, but then before going to a large scale production, you need to, before making that decision, you need to understand if your products will be marketable. It is also a way to ensure cost-efficient delivery of new products with high consumer acceptability. So that's why we are doing sensory evaluation during product development. And you need to understand very well what I'm telling you here. And also you need to know how to use examples. I'm telling you this because you can see that it is so simple, like to frame what is sensory evaluation in its application. But during examination, that's where we are going to differ. Because I don't want you to reproduce my notes. I want you to explain how you have understood the subject. So you need to use examples and so forth so that you can convince me that you know what you are discussing. So please be very, very objective, that you want to understand rather than waiting for examination period and you're going to frame what I've been telling you. You need to be able to explain using your own words, your own language. Are we together?
Yes.
Another importance of sensory evaluation application in product development, provision of insights in human behavior and perception at a more fundamental level. As I've said, that we use consumer so that they can tell if they like the product. At their, for using their perception and the human behavior instead of a machine. So you'll be able to understand if you need to proceed producing your product or not. Also, identification of sensory-based target consumer segments, analyze competitor products and evaluate new concept. Maybe if you want to produce a product for diabetic patients, that means that maybe you have to reduce sugar content. So if you have to do that, and then you need to do your sensory-based target consumers and see if the diabetic patients, are they going to like your product? And if you can introduce the first time your chocolate with less sugar, or a juice with no sugar at all, no added sugar. So all those can help you in sensory evaluation. You will be able to target a certain consumer segments depending on the type of the product you're going to make. Sensor testing can determine the impact of scaling up kitchen and or pilot samples to large-scale production. I've already explained on this. Also valuable in determining whether raw ingredients and packaging changes or modifications to the product process, for example, for cost reduction or change of a supplier will impact on sensory quality and or product acceptability. Like if you are using maybe in your production, you use water from Hilly, and then you want to change and move to Kilimanjaro water, and then you need to do sensory analysis and see if changing of the ingredient will have impact in the sensory attribute of your product. Or else you want to change, like I've said, from white sugar to brown sugar, or maybe you were using icing sugar and then now you want to use normal sugar. So changing of any raw material or ingredient in the processing require you to first understand if it will bring any change in the quality of your product. And then if there will be a change in the quality of your product, is that change going to be acceptable or not? So you need to understand that. Sensory evaluation can also be applied in research related to food products. Evaluation of a product may be needed to determine the effect an experiment had on its subject. All what I have explained can be a sort of a research study. So sensory and consumer testing is widely employed in the research arena, whereby you want to understand maybe the type of your consumer perception or the type of the market which you're supposed to focus to. All those are the research type of the study. It is used at a more fundamental level to investigate new technologies, to aid product development, and to understand consumer behavior. Sensory evaluation can also be used in quality control and assurance. It can be used as part of quality assurance program on raw material. You know that the quality of raw material will affect the quality of the final product. For example, if you are making mango juice, you need to know the quality specification of the mangoes as a raw material, so that you can come up with a juice of a certain specified quality characteristics. So if you want to prepare a mango from maybe a ripe mango, and then you cannot use green mango to prepare the same juice with the same quality characteristics, the taste, the flavor, the smell. So that means quality of raw material matters. And for that case, you can use sensory also evaluation in order to understand the different quality. Sensory testing can set consumer acceptability limits for sensory specification used during quality testing. That's like when after sensory evaluation, you can now set the limits. Maybe for this product, sugar level should be between this up to this content. Or maybe the moisture content should be this up to this, in order for your product to have the texture which was mostly liked by the consumer. For those products susceptible to taste, sensory testing can ensure substandard products are not released onto the market. As I've said, smell also is part of sensory attribute. You know, if you have a food product and it has started to deteriorate, you can sense just through the smell as well, and that's where sensory evaluation comes in. For many products, the sensory properties deteriorate ahead of microbial quality, and so in tandem with microbial tests, sensory testing can be used to determine shelf life and product variability through the supply chain. Sensory testing can be used to determine shelf life and product variability. It is repetition. Sorry. Another application is marketing. Sensory evaluation in partnership with research and development and marketing provides insights to guide development and commercial strategy. From a marketing perspective, sensory and consumer testing can inform understanding concerning product preferences, acceptability. What do they like and why? And for that case, you will be able to change in your product in order to be able to win the market. It can provide the data to support marketing claims such as best ever, new primer, and most preferred. So you can have data from sensory evaluation, and it will make you able to, to include that, like a most preferred chocolate in the city. Yeah, something like that as a market strategy. It can also ensure that sensory properties work in synergy with brand communication and advertising. I want this. I cannot read the first line. Anyway. Okay, sensory analysis gives answer from the three questions. What the product has. How can I change this? From sensory analysis, you will be able to give the answers for the question, like if the product, what is the difference between one product and another, what is the intensity of a certain sensory attribute in the food, how does a change in production, packaging, or storage affect sensory characteristics. And advantages of sensory evaluation helps manufacturers, scientists, food technologists, etc., to gain a clear perception of what ordinary consumers may experience, measures the overall impression of the products, the eating quality when consumed. Sensory panel testing can be much more rapid than most non-sensory methods. When you are talking other food analysis methods, you can see that This one is it can be more rapid and it doesn't cost much, maybe in terms of chemicals for the analysis or analytical machineries. Uses more than one sense, making them more flexible instruments. Can be very sensitive and good at detecting minute differences in product characteristics. Limitation of sensory evaluation. Sensory panelists can become fatigued with the entire process of testing and assessing descriptive data. If the panelists are testing the same product, maybe the same sensory attribute, for example, if you're talking about the smell, the nose can become fatigued very fast, and then the entire process will be affected. That is the limitation. Assessors may be subject to biases from loss of interest or from distraction. So that's why we are saying that we have to make sure that there are no any factors that can cause biases during the analysis. So you have to make sure that no distraction, the lab should be quiet, the arrangements should be very well, so that the assessor will concentrate only in the analysis of food. To ensure precision in the analysis and interpretation of the descriptive data, and for statistical analysis, several assessors may be required, making it an expensive proposition. So although it sounds like it's easy analysis, but then it depends how many assessors are required in that particular test. As I've said, there is objective and subjective test, and objective test requires trained panelists. That means you need to pay them more as they are trained panelists, they are qualified in order for you to get reliable results, and that can make sensory evaluation more expensive. The entire process of recruiting and training sensory panelists can be a time-consuming and costly process. It may not be easy to replace assessors quickly, as the incoming assessor will have to be given intensive training to develop the requisite expertise of the job. The sensory panel method can be more expensive than some non-sensory method. When we are talking about non-sensory method, in analyzing sensory attributes, you can see in the developed countries, whereby they use machinery to assess some of the sensory characteristics of the food. For example, when you are talking about ripeness of the fruits, they have a machine whereby they can detect maybe the level of the ripening of some of the fruits. So that can be done by machine. The panelist may not be good at quantifying perceptions. Interpretation of results may get problematic and be open to dispute. So you have, like, if you're talking about statistical analysis, then you need to have someone who is knowledgeable regarding the statistical analytical method, so that you end up with the true results. Important rules for successful sensory testing: you need to set clear objectives. The sensory test method chosen must fit the objective of the research question. What do you want to analyze? Do you want to describe your product, or do you want to determine if there is a difference between one product and another? So developing a robust experimental strategy and design. Before doing any sensory analysis, you need to have your strategy and a design for your sensory evaluation exercise. Applying appropriate statistical techniques. Appropriate panelists must be selected for the test. Consumers or users for affective tests and screened. Trained personnel for descriptive and discrimination tests. Inappropriate questions must not be asked for those panelists. Consumers should not be asked for descriptive information, as descriptive information required trained panelists. trained panelists should not be asked about their likes in these slides, because they know very well all those kind of things, and they will not give you a clear picture of the market of the consumer. So trained panelists are used to describe the product or to show if there is any difference in sensory characteristics of a particular food. Why are we preferring to use sensory tests? No special laboratory or equipment is required. Just a room, you can arrange a room very well. You will do that when you are coming